Hey guys, so today we're going to continue reading our book, Babe and Me. I actually wore my favorite baseball team shirt today. Love the Cincinnati Reds. So today we're going to be starting with chapter 3, and this chapter is titled Going Back, Back, Back. When Dad came over the next day, I almost didn't recognize him. He was wearing a dark brown suit that looked a little too big on him, and a vest and a tie. He had on two-tone shoes and a hat that looked like a kind of gangsters wear in old movies. "How do I look, Butch?" he asked when I opened the door. "Pretty snazzy threads, huh?" He handed me a big cardboard box and told me to open it. Inside was a wool sports jacket, a flat cap with a very small brim, and a pair of navy wool pants. The pants weren't long enough to be long pants, but they weren't short enough to be shorts either. What's up with this?" I asked, holding up the pants. "They're knickers," he replied. "If you want to fit in, you've got to dress the part." I did a little research to find out what boys wore in 1932. "They dress like dorks," I said, taking off my jeans and pulling on the knickers. I think even my mom would have gotten a laugh out of seeing me and Dad all dressed up, but she was out grocery shopping. "Back in the 1930s, this was cool," Dad said. Dad took out a thick wallet and opened it for me. It was stuffed with bills. My dad doesn't have a lot of money. He must have taken his life savings out of the bank. "There's more hidden in my sock," he revealed, "and it's all old currency. I know a guy who collects the stuff." "Why do you need to bring along so much cash?" I asked. "I worked out a plan, Joe. I figure if we're going to do this thing, we should do it right, make some serious money. First, when we get to 1932, we're going to find a bank and deposit 5,000 bucks. For what?" "Because if we deposit 5,000 bucks, it will start earning interest in 1932. Then, when we get home and I go back to the same bank 70 years later, that 5,000 will have grown. If it earns just 5% interest in 70 years, it will be worth more than $160,000. I figured it out on a computer." "Wow, that's pretty smart, Dad." "Oh, I'm just getting started," Dad continued excitedly. "After we deposit the money at the bank, we're going to find a bookmaker." "Somebody who makes books?" "No, somebody who takes bets, a bookie. I know the Yankees are going to win the 1932 World Series in 4 straight games. It's in the history books. I even know the final score of all the games. But they don't know this stuff in 1932 until after the games are played. I'll be able to place a bet on the series and make a fortune." "Dad, you're a genius." "Finally," he continues, "if we are lucky enough to get close to Babe Ruth at all, we're going to get him to sign as many bats, balls, and gloves as we can. That stuff is worth a pile of money in today's memorabilia market. One baseball signed by the Babe sells for about 5,000 bucks." Even as I marveled at my dad's money-making schemes, they made me feel a little bad. I didn't think it was illegal or anything, but it seemed slightly dishonest to go back in time and use what you know about the future to make a lot of money. What made me feel worse was that it all was my idea to begin with. Dad saw the look on my face. "Joe," he said, "I'm getting desperate. I've tried my hardest to make an honest living. I really did. It hasn't worked out. Think it this way. We can help each other. You help me make a few bucks, and I help you to go to 1932 to see if Babe caught his shot. What's wrong with that?" "Nothing," I decided. Dad and I sat down on the living room couch next to each other. I took the Ruth card out of his plastic holder. "How do we do this?" Dad asked. "Do I hold the card too?" "The power isn't in the card," I told him. "It's in me. To take you along, there has to be a connection between you and me." I hadn't held hands with my dad in years, but there was no other way. I put out my hand and he took it. His palm was sweaty, so was mine. I held the Ruth card in my other hand. "Close your eyes," I instructed. I closed mine, too. Almost immediately, I felt the tingling. "Do you feel anything?" I asked. "Yeah, a weird sensation," Dad replied. "Like my foot's asleep, but it's in my hand." "Wait," I said suddenly, dropping the card. "What's the matter?" "I forgot something." I ran up to my room and grabbed a new pack of baseball cards from my desk drawer. They have bathrooms in 1932, you know, Dad joked when I got back. I didn't go to the bathroom, I explained. A baseball card is like a plane ticket for me. The Ruth card will send us to 1932, but it won't get us back home. We need to bring a new card with us for that. If I didn't have one with me, we would be stuck in 1932 forever. I slipped the new pack of cards into my pocket and sat on the couch again. Is there anything else you forgot? Dad asked, a little annoyed. No, let's do it. I picked up the Ruth card again and grabbed Dad's hand. We closed our eyes. The tingling sensation started right up again. I visualized Babe Ruth in the 1932 World Series. If only I could go there, I thought. Feel it? I asked Dad. I feel it, he replied. It's working. And then everything faded away. Uh-oh, things are getting pretty crazy. All right, Chapter 4, Blown Off Course. When I opened my eyes, we were no longer sitting on the living room couch. We were sitting outdoors on a hard bench. A big car whizzed by, spraying a cloud of exhaust all over us. It was a big, boxy old car with a spare tire mounted right outside on the passenger side. The tire had a bunch of spokes in it, like a bicycle tire. It worked, marveled Dad. It really worked. I looked up. The building across the street stretched up and down the block. More boxy old cars streamed down the street. It felt chilly out, much colder than it had been in Louisville. We must be in Chicago, Joe, Dad said excitedly. Chicago in 1932. Look at the car. There's a 1931 Bentley Tourer and a 1929 Pierce Arrow. We got up and started walking, staring at the buildings and the cars rushing past. Louisville was a big city, but it was nothing like this. I'd never been to Chicago. On the corner was a boy about my age. He was holding up a newspaper. Yanks beat Cubs in Game 2, he shouted. Read all about it. The World Series. Dad picked up the paper from the box. Dad picked up a paper from the pile on the newsboy's wooden box. Hey, why are you selling the New York Journal? He asked the boy. The kid looked at Dad suspiciously. For the fun of it, Mac. I'm really a millionaire. You want a paper or not? Are we in New York City or Chicago? I asked the newsboy. He gave me the same look he gave to Dad. If you don't even know where you are, buddy, you got big problems. How much for the paper? Dad asked. 2 cents, Mac. Dad flipped the kid a quarter. Keep the change, he said. The newsboy looked at the quarter as if it were a piece of gold. Thanks, mister. Suddenly, he was a lot friendlier. Dad hustled me away, and I could see the growing anger in his eyes. What are we doing in New York? He complained. Ruth caught a shot in Chicago at Wrigley Field. I don't know. I was mad, too. It's not like the movies. It's not like I can turn a dial on some time machine and land exactly where I want to go. I got us to 1932, didn't I? All right. Let's both calm down, Dad said, still angry. He started flipping through the newspaper, looking for the sports section, I guessed. There is no separate sports section, the way newspapers have today. Finally, Dad found the few pages of the paper that were devoted to sports. Most of the sports coverage was about the World Series. This is what the lead article said. Yankees defeat Cubs in Game 2. Capacity crowd expected to witness Game 3 in Chicago Saturday. Root will pitch for Cubs. Talk of 4-game sweep. You must have messed up somehow, Dad said, barely distinguishing his disgust. We have to find a way to get to Chicago for the Game 3 on Saturday. Maybe we can fly, I suggested quietly. I doubt that. They had regular flights in 1932, Dad said, and I'm not sure I'd want to get on one of those old planes anyway. The Wright brothers only invented the airplane about 33 years ago. A sign at the corner said 12th Street. We started walking, looking for a taxi or a subway train that would take us to Grand Central Terminal. That was the famous train station in New York, Dad told me. We walked past the store with a big penny arcade sign on it. It was like a video game arcade, but there were no video games inside. They had simple pinball games, a shooting gallery, and these big wooden boxes where people would drop in a penny, turn a crank, and peer into a tiny window. Dad said they were called Nickelodeons, like the TV channel. I wanted to try it, but Dad didn't seem to be in the mood for stopping. As we walked past the other stores, I couldn't help but notice the signs. Men's shoes, $8.50. Men's suits, $25. Breakfast, 25 cents. Somebody was renting an apartment for $50 a month. Dad's mood seemed to brighten. Look at this, Joe, he said excitedly. In 1932, you could go to the movies for just 50 cents and see a double feature. We walked silently. I had an idea that might be going through his head. I had an idea of what might be going through his head. Back home, he had no job, no wife, no life, and big bills. With his life savings, he could live like a king in 1932. I didn't say anything. If he wanted to stay in 1932, it was fine with me. I hardly ever saw him anyway. It would have been easy for the two of us to part company right there. I could have used my new baseball cards to go back home, and Dad could have started his new life over again in 1932. But suddenly, we heard a commotion down the street around the corner. People were yelling and chanting. Something was going on. Chapter 5. Hooverville. Dad and I turned the corner on Fifth Avenue, and there, in the middle of New York City, was a park. It surprised me, and I think it surprised Dad too. A small sign read Union Square Park, but there were no playground or anything. Nobody was playing ball or lounging in the sun in this park. One side of the park had a row of rickety shacks made out of packing cases and sheets of scrap metal. One of them was painted with the words, "Welcome to Hooverville." Inside one of the shacks, a lady and two kids were warming their hands over a fire they had made in a metal garbage can. As soon as we entered the park, a couple of guys with scraggly hair and worn clothing surrounded us. They held out their hands and asked politely, "Got any spare change?" Dad gave them each a nickel, which made them extremely happy. "We sure ain't going to find Babe Ruth here," Dad said, annoyed. As we walked into the park, I saw people selling pencils and old ladies selling fruit from baskets. Guys were sleeping on the grass, wrapped in overcoats. Some people were just wandering around with nothing to do. They had dazed, hopeless looks on their faces, like they had survived an earthquake and didn't know what to do next. "I completely forgot," Dad said, staring at some men who were washing their clothes in a fountain. The Depression, 1932, was the worst of it. I had heard about the Depression, but didn't know much about it. Dad told me that in 1929, the stock market crashed, sending America and the whole wide world into a depression. Rich people became penniless overnight. Thousands of companies went out of business, and millions of people lost their jobs. People had no money. Farmers stopped growing crops because nobody could afford to buy them. Factories shut down because people weren't buying any goods. Hundreds of people waited in lines to apply for a single job or to get a loaf of bread. There was no welfare back then, no help for people who were in need. Kids starved. A lot of people just gave up and killed themselves. It went on like that for years. Half of me wanted to get out of the park, but the other half was fascinated by it all. We walked around. At the corner of the park, on the sidewalk, a row of 6 or 7 people stood on wooden crates, each crate about 20 feet apart. They were making speeches, and small groups of people gathered around them to listen. From a distance, the voices of the speakers blended into one another, but as we got closer, I could see that each one had his own message. "I fought in the Great War," a man shouted. "Now I can't buy corn to feed my family." "My brother's a farmer in Iowa," a guy yelled back. "He can't make a living selling corn for just 8 cents a bushel." Some people booed. Somebody threw a rock at the guy whose brother was a farmer. "Tell your brother to plow his corn under," somebody hollered. "Tell him to show the government he won't stand for it." "If the government won't give us food, I say we just take it," an angry man yelled. "We've waited long enough." "We've got to unionize," another speaker shouted. "That's the answer." "God is the answer," a lady commented. "Roosevelt is the answer," an old man hollered. "No, communism is the answer," said somebody else. "Let's march to City Hall." "It's all President Hoover's fault." The sooner we get him out of the White House, the sooner the recovery will begin. A vote for Roosevelt is a vote for America. A vote for Roosevelt is a vote for the rich, said somebody else. 2 policemen came along and tried to calm people down. They had the opposite effect. Somebody threw a rock at one of them, and it bounced off his helmet. The cop pulled out a nightstick and hit a guy with it. "Leave me alone," the guy yelled, holding the sign in his hand. "I'm just exercising my freedom of speech." "Your freedom of speech ends at my ears," the cop replied. "That isn't right," a lady said. The people in the crowd began to hiss and boo and throw things at the cops. The second cop pulled out his pistol and fired it in the air. The boom echoed off the buildings at the sides of each of the park. That shut everybody up, at least for a minute. "Dad," I whispered, "I'm afraid. We better get out of here before we get killed." Dad said, pushing his way through the crowd. I was right behind him, tightly holding on to the back of his coat so we couldn't be separated. I was feeling scared and guilty. I never meant for us to see all this. All I wanted was to see Babe Ruth hitting his called shot home run. What had gone wrong? We were making our way through the crowd when a roar went up at the other end of the park. I tried to see what it was, but I wasn't tall enough to look over the heads of the people around me. What is it, Dad?" "I can't tell," Dad replied. "A big car just drove up." A teenage boy had climbed a tree near us, and he was squinting his eyes, peering down toward the commotion. "Hey, look," the boy shouted. "It's Babe Ruth." So, join me for our next reading, and we will start on chapter 6, which is titled The Babe. So things are just starting to get interesting. I hope you guys have a great day.